Welcome to Round Hill Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Hey, Ed.
Hey, Leslie.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Very
Good to see
exciting. You too. So we are talking Easter.
Easter.
Today I did jazz hands.
Is that what that was?
Sort of. So what are we talking about with regards to Easter? Because we have discussed this idea of agitation.
Yeah, we're staying with it.
I like it.
It's
Let's
becoming a
do
theme.
it. It's becoming a theme.
It must be suggesting something that needs to be addressed in my life. And so there.
Just bring it to the podcast.
Right.
I like it very much. So start us off.
Let me read the first few verses of the gospel according to Luke chapter 24. This is the Easter story. Mm-hmm. So all four gospels, these portraits that we have of Jesus, they all have Easter stories. That was very important to the growth of the early church. Good thing to keep in mind that these Easter stories were probably not written until about anywhere from 40 to 80 years after Jesus died.
Okay.
A big gap. But there's plenty of material from the letters of Paul, who was writing before them early on, and he picks this up as his very, very key theme, the resurrection of Jesus. So here's how Luke describes it. On the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb. So we are hearing that these are some of the women who have been part of the circle of Jesus. Okay. Taking the spices that they had prepared, they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. Surprise.
Hey.
But when they went in, they did not find the body. So now we have a problem. Mm-hmm. While they were perplexed about this, I want to underscore the word perplexed, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified, underscore that word, and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen." So that's the Easter story in condensed form. Mm-hmm. He is not here. Mm-hmm. And that becomes more or less the mantra of the early church. He's not here, he's risen. It means there's hope of life beyond life. All that we live and die for doesn't just disappear and vanish. Mm-hmm. And so in times like these, by the way, when there are so many challenges that face us, we may be wondering about some of those questions.
For sure.
Like, what's the point? So it turns out there's a huge point, because here's a story about someone whose work seemed to almost vanish overnight, and it turns out that it didn't, and he didn't either. Wow. He's not here. He's risen. So I just want to start us off there, and, there's more agitation.
More agitation.
Perplexed, terrified. And what may have seemed like it was going to be more or less standard routine trip to the graveyard turns out to be something else.
Right. So do we think they were going to pray, to pay tribute?
I think these stories suggest that they're going to give some attention to the body.
Okay. Through
some kind of anointing with spices, oils, as part of the tradition of the time. And so they have one mindset about what they're going to experience, and that's completely blown apart.
I have a really random question.
I probably can't answer it, but you
That's
go ahead.
Fair. Do we collectively, do we know if this would have been a tomb that would have been for a single person, or because of the nature of his death, would he have been with others?
Depending on who you read and what your thoughts are, most imagery around this story is that this is a grave or a sepulcher for a single person.
Okay.
And there's a giant stone that's been placed in front of it.
Right.
But I would ask you in return, given all these many podcasts that we have shared, given the fact that Jesus has so often been called a Mediterranean Jewish peasant from the perspective of the Roman Empire, a zero, a nobody, does it make sense that there's a grave specifically set aside? There's some tradition about the fact that someone made available a grave space for him. but it just seems out of sync with everything else we know about him.
Right.
And so scholars like John Dominic Crossan, who's written a lot about these stories, asks us to consider very seriously what happened to that body.
Right.
We want to think that there was a particular place set aside, a stone rolled in front of the opening, all of that, right? A dedicated space. But does that really make sense given the story? So whether it's a mass grave, bodies that were people who were crucified and killed probably never made it to a grave, mass or otherwise.
Sure.
I mean, they were left for whatever animals or whatever else, and hate to be that grim about it, but that's something that Crossan mentions in one of his books, where he said, just, stop and think about it. Were Roman soldiers interested in burying bodies?
Right. With any sort of dignity? Absolutely not.
They were gambling. I mean, apparently they were gambling for the few clothes that Jesus had. I mean, they weren't interested in giving any kind of burial service. So it's a valid question. And the way we think about it reveals, how we think about Jesus a little bit, right? Now, do we really grasp his nobodiness?
Yeah.
Or do we want to say, hey, there was some extra attention given to this person?
Right. By his circle. Like, how much was his circle able to kind of achieve in that time?
And I think the stories say nothing. They were scared to death.
Yeah.
John's gospel says they went to a room and hid out, and Jesus had to walk through the wall to get to them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
And Luke also describes that some of them, they were headed out of town. Mm-hmm. And that's where he intervenes after his death, after his resurrection. Mm-hmm. He's the same Jesus, but he's completely different. Mm-hmm. They can't recognize him or don't recognize him.
Right.
And but that's how he interacts with them when they're leaving town.
So how are the women able to get to him?
I think according to this story, story is very, very carefully crafted.
Sure.
Right? And it's showing it's the women in this circle who are there right up to the end.
I mean, I tried not to emphasize the women in my question, but thank you for saying that.
Now, after all of this happened, as the story goes today, these women who go to the tomb, they do go back to the men, wherever they happen to be. And the response of the men is just maybe as you might think. After they tell the apostles what happened, it says, but these words, that is the words of the women, seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. By the way, these are
I need a minute.
Yeah, there you go. Do you want to readjust your chair or anything?
Oh my God, because that's never happened in the history of the world before.
Exactly.
Okay.
Shocker. And so the thing is, here are the first preachers of the Christian tradition.
Hey,
these women.
Amazing. First. He's risen, they say, right?
Surprise, surprise, though. But there's always a but or an and yet or something. Peter, who's not always been recognized as the one. I mean, he's like the most impulsive one. He does things, and then he probably wishes he hadn't done them.
Yeah. Is he the one that fell in the water?
Yes.
Okay,
he starts off okay.
He starts okay.
And in fact, he starts off really well.
Yeah.
And then down he goes.
Okay.
His name in Greek means rock, so sank like a stone. But Peter, wait for it, got up.
Hey.
And ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen clothes by themselves, and then he went home amazed at what had happened. Now, he could have believed the women, I just want to say. He could have been amazed then.
He could have been amazed.
But he had to go see for him. And look,
we'll give him partial credit.
He's from the show me state.
Yes.
He's got to go and see what.
He's got to go and see for himself, which frankly, I probably would have too.
Let's be honest. I mean, I think most of us are saying that's amazing. It'll be more amazing if I go see it for myself.
Yeah, that's valid.
I just think the thing that stood out for me, so there's agitation here because, look, if you've got Christmas, you've got Easter, and you've got Pentecost, which is the story about the way that the Spirit lives inside this new church or this church that's being formed. You with me?
So with you.
Okay. Christmas, Easter, Pentecost.
Got it.
All of these 3 major festivals have something major in common, and that is the people associated with them are amazed and scared out of their skins. In each one.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, they're right on the cutting edge there.
Yeah.
And here it is again. They're amazed and they're perplexed.
Yeah.
And I think that part of what we've done, when I see so much, when I see cards that people, have been created about, with quotations about God or images or something, whether that's for holy days or major festivals, these cards always reflect the beautiful and the amazing part.
Yeah.
Never the scary and the perplexing part, because that's
Sure.
probably not going to sell very well.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's really interesting about this. The other thing that may be interesting, I hadn't realized this till I was reading this passage yesterday, actually. It says that Peter ran to the tomb. And that's understandable, right?
Sure.
He just heard something amazing, so he wants to go check it out.
Yeah.
And in one of the other gospel stories of the resurrection, there's a lot of running.
Okay.
People get the news, they run, one person outruns another. And I mean, there's a lot of rushing going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that one of the most beloved stories that Jesus told was the story of the prodigal son. This is about a young man who says to his father, basically, I want my inheritance now. I'm like, I can't wait till you're dead. So give it to me now. And so he takes it and he goes and lives very poorly and he wastes the money. He goes back home. And of course, the elder brother is there who stayed home. He's a dutiful son. And he's all bent out of shape because of all this that happens. When the younger son comes home, the story says that the father ran to meet him. And the interesting thing about that is that for someone to run like that in that culture is really out of character.
Okay.
And so it's that eagerness and that excitement.
Mm-hmm.
It's like somebody goes to the airport to greet somebody and they see them coming off the plane and they run around, to give them a big hug. And in this story, it's so important that this happens, that Peter runs to do it.
Right.
And there's the father running to greet the son coming home. So, I love this thought that here's a story about something that's so good that people are running to meet the good news.
Right.
And I'd just love to ask the question, how can what would we like to be running toward now? Something so good in our lives that we would get up and run towards it.
Yeah. And it sounds like that word would have jumped out to early readers of these stories.
I think so. Yeah. Someone years and years ago introduced me to a wonderful book called Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. And this book was written by a biblical scholar who lived in the Middle East for many, many years, several decades actually. And he made it his mission. He was a very accomplished linguist, so he could speak, all the local languages and dialects. He made it his mission to go visit local villages and talk with people about the stories. So he would tell them the stories and then say, what do you think about that? Which I thought was such a great move.
That's cool.
And the feedback that he got is, you'd never see someone running like that.
Yeah. You just wouldn't do it.
That's really out of character.
Got it.
And he has all kinds of wonderful other perspective on these stories. But I just think there's a sign about how this particular piece of good news was so incredibly good.
Yeah.
And why the whole Christian movement essentially was built out of these stories of resurrection.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think that's very cool. I saw a thing on the internet, which means therefore it has to be true. But I wanted to share it with you as much as I can remember because it occurred to me. I was going to actually dig into this more, but I forgot. But here's the Cliff Notes, that there's a theory going around. You can tell me what you know about this, if you've heard about this at all, that this year is a year where scholars think that it actually, you know how Christmas is like doesn't line up with Jesus' birth at all. There's a theory that this year Easter lines up really, 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 really well. This is an internet theory. I can see your face already. Because of apparently a lunar eclipse and a reported earthquake.
Oh, interesting.
That happened around like this time of year in this sort of I clearly could have prepared that story better, but you get the general gist.
I'm taking it in.
But maybe you got, so there's a theory going on that like this year we're actually lined up because of the lunar calendar better. But I thought Easter was aligned to the lunar calendar. I'm breaking down my own theory. It is.
Yes. I can't speak to that. We did have a 2.3 magnitude earthquake right here a few weeks ago.
During staff meeting, guys. We all stopped and stared at each other.
So I don't know if that has any connection to any of this.
Maybe.
But it is interesting that going back to the whole agitation theme, I think it's Matthew's gospel where there is an earthquake and it's like nature itself is agitated by what's going on. So maybe there's a cosmic agitation that's happening right now.
Maybe.
Somehow linked, who knows exactly how, with another kind of agitation a long time ago.
Our Earth is unhappy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're sort of speaking up. And so that's...
Even the rocks will cry out.
Well done.
Thanks. Redeem myself from my bad story.
Yeah, great connection.
It's all very fascinating. So I quickly, in our few minutes that we have left before I know you have a meeting, the 4 Gospels and the 4 Easter stories. How would you, if you were going to describe, do we always use Luke? No. If you were going to describe the one we're using this year, which is Luke, how would you then compare that telling to Matthew, Mark, and John?
Great question. So just quickly, John feels, as often is the case, the most developed from a literary perspective.
Okay.
There's a lot happening, and there's this very beautiful and touching scene where Mary Magdalene is present at the tomb, and she embraces, she sees a man she thinks is the gardener.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And is confused by that. That turns out to be Jesus. She must hold him in some way because he says, "Do not cling to me," which I think is a very powerful message. Yeah. What you knew about me is still important, but there's something else now maybe you need to know about me. So be open to that. And Matthew, plenty of perplexity, especially from nature, as well as from the people who are involved. And there's an instruction that's very important there because Jesus says to those who followed him, go back to Galilee. So in a way, it's kind of going back to your origins. Don't lose that sense. It's a little different from John, right? It's almost in a sense, go back to where we first met, recapture some of that. Mark is the most mysterious of them all because the story seems to end about halfway through. And literally in the Greek version, in the original Greek, the last word is for, F-O-R. That's the end of the sentence. It's like somehow that he stopped, whoever was writing, he or she, stopped writing. We don't have the rest of it. The phrase that ends the story is "for they were afraid," which is a very unusual way to end a story that you want to be very compelling and attractive.
Right.
And so Mark received 2 later editorial endings because somebody said you can't end the story like that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of suspicion around those 2 endings. So I always think that's the story that says, we've got to finish it up. That really, these stories all feel like they're very complete, but Mark's points back at us and says, so what's going to be the next line after "for they were afraid"?
Yeah. What do you do after you're afraid?
So they're all very unique, very unique. There's definitely crossover between them for sure, but I like the fact that they're so different and that they're all looking at this central event through 4 different experiences, and not only individually, but they've got communities that they're attached to. So these communities are shaping how they understand these stories as well.
Yeah.
So that's the way they look when they're compared to one another.
I'm sure somebody has already done this, but it occurred to me that it might be interesting to amalgamate them and combine them into one thing,
mashed up story.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I've never seen that. And part of it is that Matthew, Mark, and Luke use somewhat common sources.
Okay.
And so they already have a little bit of this
similarity,
complex, similar vision, a little overlap. John's somewhat the outlier, has some very distinctive material, but that's a really interesting question to think about that. If you rewrote the whole story from beginning to end and included all of the detail.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's just a thought.
Yeah.
I just want, that also feels like it kind of goes against the whole purpose of it, which is that you get the different perspectives and like there is no one true telling of it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think one thing about it is that, we have some, when you play with the texts, right, and experiment with them, then things sometimes emerge that you wouldn't see if we left them apart.
Right.
So it's one other way to read these stories. And every year, of course, we're trying to look at them through, we are looking at them through new eyes, but we're trying to see something that we may not have noticed before, or something speaks to us this year that hasn't spoken to us for a long time. That's what makes these stories, that's what gives them energy.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. Well, awesome. Thank you for this.
Great session. Exhausted.
And scene. No, but thank you, guys. Thank you, Ed. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.